let me get this straight.
Okay.
So I should be viewing menopause as the physiological reconstruction of the brain.
Yes.
Really, based on the loss of estrogen. And I'm going to try and go a little bit further here with my science. So there's receptors in the brain that estrogen interacts with. And as estrogen doesn't show up, those receptors start to shut down. And that's why we're seeing the brain appear to sort of shrink in volume a little bit, but also just the activity of it seems to drop. And it's really the loss of estrogen is the causal factor of that. So if in my muggle science here, this is, science for 10-year-olds over here, over this side of the table anyway, I go, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll take some estrogen and ping, we'll inject it. Everything will be fine. The brain will stay nice and illuminated. We'll avoid the brain fog, the hot flashes, the depression, the sleep disruption and everything. We'll just inject some estrogen.
Yeah, I wouldn't inject it, but yes.
I don't know, how do you administer it?
By mouth.
We'll eat it.
Skin.
We'll rub it. We'll do everything. We'll rub it. We'll inject it.
Yes.
We'll put it on top of cereal. We'll do whatever we have to do to keep it up.
Face in the morning.
Yeah, we'll do a facial, do estrogen facials, and we'll keep it up. We'll put it in the coffee, everything.
Right.
We'll smell it, sniff it, and then everything will be fine.
Yeah.
That's the end of the podcast then.
That's it. Bye. If only it were that simple. Mm-hmm. So we do have hormones that are available for treatment. I think most people are familiar with the term hormone replacement therapy or HRT. And that option has a strangely tortured history where in the 1940s, estrogen therapy was actually the #1 best-selling drug in America and many other parts of the world. And most women going through menopause in the 50s and 60s and 70s and whatnot were put on hormones and left on hormones, high doses of hormones for life. And the idea back then is that these hormones would not only reduce the hot flashes and make menopause better and more tolerable or just gentler, but would also protect against things like heart disease and dementia. And then in the 90s, the government intervened and said, well, you can't just do hormones to women without doing clinical trials first, even though that was the practice for 30 years, right? And so they launched the largest clinical trial in history looking at HRT for relief of hot flashes, but also for prevention of heart disease and dementia. And that was in 1993, and the study was running, and it was suddenly stopped in 2002, because what they found is that hormone therapy was actually doing a lot of damage to some of the women in the study. And what the media reported is that the hormone therapy in particular was increasing the risk of breast cancer, while also increasing the risk of heart disease and dementia. And everyone panicked. And so many women just stopped taking hormones overnight. That also obviously kicked off a lot of lawsuits and effectively stopped research on hormones for menopause and prevention of chronic diseases. And it took 15, 20 years for the research to resume, say 10, but really it's taking a lot longer than anyone would have thought. And now we know better. So one thing that everybody says is that study is called the Women's Health Initiative. They did the best they could with the knowledge they had and the population they had. But the problem is that they were looking at women who were in their 70s and 80s, right? So if your brain has changed at that point and the receptors are not there, you can't simply put the hormones back in because the system is not there to use them. And what those investigators have found is that actually that can do more harm than good with the hormones that they were using back then.
Okay.
Right? So today we have different hormones. We use lower doses. The hormones are taken either by mouth or transdermally, like the patch through the skin, which is gentler on the liver and reduces the risk of blood clots and other vascular issues. We have different types of progesterone, which is another important hormone. Today we tend to use bioidentical hormones rather than synthetic hormones, which were used back then. And that overall seems a lot safer. And at the same time, hormones should be used for menopause when women are going through menopause.
Not after.
Not after. And a lot of research, including my work, has shown that hormones work best for the brain if you take them within a 10-year window of the final menstrual period. And technically, you want to start taking them prior to your final menstrual period, because what these hormones do is that they stabilize your hormonal concentration. So they're not just supplements, but the real power, the real magic, if you will, of hormone therapy, at least the way it was intended, is that you take it before menopause to really stabilize things. So your hormones don't start fluctuating back and forth, and hopefully you don't even get the symptoms, the hot flashes, the night sweats, the insomnia.
Give me an analogy for that then. So those studies that were done in the 1990s, there was 160,000 women took part in that study.
Yeah, the Women's Health Initiative. That's a disaster, for an analogy.
Because they were giving the hormones to women that were in their 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
It's effectively like trying to put petrol in a car when the petrol valve is sealed or the car is off.
Pretty much, yes. Yes,
so just pumping it into there when the systems are no longer on doesn't work. And the systems are no longer on because they shut down because there was no estrogen.
Yes.
Those systems didn't shut down because the person was just old. Those systems would have carried on working if they were given estrogen. Is that accurate?
That's the idea, yes.
Okay, so
that's the whole idea.
You want to just start, you really want to be thinking about taking estrogen when those systems are still on and working so that it can work and sustain the systems.
That's right. And the idea is to take hormones when you have the symptoms.
It's kind of like a car, because if you don't use a car for a long time, it just doesn't, the engine stops working.
Yeah, pretty much.
If you left a car for 10 years just on the side and then tried to put petrol in, I'm pretty sure it still wouldn't work.
There would be glitches at the minimum, right?
Yeah, at a minimum. So what age then? Because, I've got a partner, that's what she's 30, 31 years old.
That's young. That's young to start. I think once you start having the symptoms of menopause, so it's the hot flashes. So right now, hormone therapy is only approved for vasomotor symptoms, which are hot flashes and night sweats.
Okay.
It's also used off-label for support of sleep, especially when sleep is disrupted by having hot flashes at night. And it's also used for relief of mild depressive symptoms that are caused by menopause and not other reasons. We're doing research now to test whether hormone therapy may be helpful for brain fog, because believe it or not, it's not an indication. And hormone therapy is not currently recommended for support of cognitive function. And there are a lot of scientists, myself included, who find that a little bit puzzling. But we also agree that more research is needed. So we are trying to do the research and show that. Well, we want to understand if taking hormones can actually support cognitive function. Because look, when I go through menopause, I want to have all the solutions and options that I can possibly have. So I'm doing the research as fast as I can to also help myself and a lot of other women. But right now, if you have brain fog as a menopausal woman, the overall recommendation is kind of suck it up.
What would you do? You said when you go through menopause, what would you do?
So the pillars of lifestyle adjustments for menopause are diet, exercise, sleep hygiene, stress reduction, avoiding toxins, which is where I go a little bit overboard sometimes, regular medical checkups to make sure that you are in good health overall and there's nothing in your medical history that might make your menopause worse. And then I am also looking into pharmaceutical options, which I do not take at this time, but I'm deciding whether or not that's an option for me when the time comes.
Do you know what a prepper is?
No.
It's a term for someone who's preparing for the end of the world.
Oh, goodness.
And they have like a bunker, they have a food supply, wow. They're like buying guns.
That I wouldn't do, but they do other things. Like there's no plastic in my kitchen.
No plastic, okay. So let's have a look at some of these things then, that are preparations and why you're choosing to do them. Before we do that, I just wanted to for people that don't know the full range of symptoms and when those symptoms the phase of menopause in which those symptoms typically show up.
Okay.
Are there different symptoms for different phases?
No.
They're not. They're just a variety of symptoms.
So since you seem to be interested in the stages, let's go a little bit deeper.
Okay.
All right. Let's say, so your girlfriend is in her 30s,
yeah,
right? So most women in their 30s have a regular menstrual cycle. As soon as you hit 40-ish, ballpark, you still have a regular menstrual cycle, but you may start seeing changes. Some months it could be a little bit shorter. Some months it could be a little bit longer. Some months it could be a little bit lighter. Some other months it could be a little bit heavier. I strongly recommend keeping track because that's very helpful to realize when you are past the premenopausal stage and when you're about to enter the perimenopausal stage, which is more complex than just 1, 2, 3 stages. So once you have a regular menstrual cycle, is the premenopausal stage, and there's actually 2 separate phases. There's the early phase where your menstrual cycle is the way it's always been for women with a very regular menstrual cycle. Then it starts changing a little bit, maybe just a couple of days, maybe a little bit earlier, a little bit later, lighter, heavier, but still very regular. That's the late premenopausal stage. At that point, you may start skipping periods, but maybe you just skip it 1 month and then it's back. And then at some point, you skip it for 2 months and then it's back and it's regular. That's the early perimenopausal stage. At that point, the most common complaint is difficulty sleeping, is poor sleep.
Okay.
When women start having a hard time, not just falling asleep, but staying asleep. And that's usually because progesterone is going down. It's unusual to have hot flashes at that point, but brain fog may happen, especially around your menstrual cycle. When you wake up in the morning, you have no energy. And just the idea of checking your email feels like an ordeal. It can really happen. Usually it may last just a couple of hours, perhaps it lasts a day, but it's something to pay attention to because that could be a preview to the menopausal transition. So then you start skipping periods, and then you start skipping more periods. And at some point, your periods will be more than 3 months apart. So you have one today, nothing for 3 months, you're not pregnant, it will come back, but you know what I mean. So the frequency is going to diminish. You're going to get fewer and fewer periods spaced apart more and more. That's the late perimenopausal stage where the symptoms really creep in. So that's when most women have the hot flashes, the night sweats, actual insomnia sometimes, mood changes. Sometimes there's irritability. Sometimes there can be tearfulness. Sometimes you cry for no reason. Sometimes you just feel really down in the dumps and you don't know why. There could be the brain fog. There could be forgetfulness. It's important to know that as disruptive as that might be, it's actually not uncommon. I can't say normal because it does not feel normal for sure, but it's expected.
Included
for
in that,
many women.
I saw in your book, you said things like vaginal dryness.
Yes, that's not a brain symptom, is a bodily symptom. That can happen earlier.
Weight gain.
Yeah, that can happen.
Slow metabolism and digestive issues. Overactive bladder.
Yeah, that's a little bit later usually, more like after menopause.
Muscle tensions and aches.
Yeah. Look, there's a whole range of
Weak
symptoms.
bones.
Yeah, well, you can have tinnitus.
Tinnitus, which is that ringing in the ear.
Yes, or electric shock sensations, panic attack.
Please do keep going with that was very helpful. You're going through the phases and overlapping them with the symptoms.
Yes, so the late perimenopausal stage, which is defined as not having your period for 3 months or more at a time, is when the symptoms really kick hard. Then at some point, you just stop having your period for good.
Sorry, what age does the symptoms start kicking hard typically on average?
47.
47 usually?
45, 47.
Okay.
It's harder on Black women and Hispanic women.
Why?
We don't know. But there are some differences related to race and ethnicity. And usually, Black and Hispanic women may experience more severe symptoms of menopause, which is something that we should really talk about because there's hardly any research done on this. And it's completely unfair, you know.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.